Ladies and gentlemen, we got to get into the opening salvo topic. And well, folks, let's talk Forza Horizon 5, Fuzzy Belvedere. Because look, a couple of weeks ago, when it was confirmed that it would be coming out in the spring, we saw the wish list on PlayStation 5 hit number one for this Xbox exclusive that is now multi-plat, right? Eventually, I think this even gets over to Switch 2. We'll see, but it's definitely releasing on PlayStation 5. And thanks to Okami 13 underscore, we know that it's officially releasing on April 24th, which is big, big news. Now, there are two versions that are up for pre-order. They have the standard $59.99, $60, and there is a deluxe edition, which I believe is if you can correct me, Fuzzy, $70, right? It's a $70 one, so it's a $60 and $70 purchase. This is something that a lot of us old graybeards, and of course, shout out to the graybeards who keep the Xbox community grounded, because I think that we are, we're fans, right? We're fans first. Sure, we're consumers, but we come from an era where, unfortunately, I hate to use the word conditioned. That's such an ugly word, but we were conditioned where we bought a console, we bought specific games for that console, and when the next generation came along, we either traded in what we had to get the new, or if you had disposable income and you wanted to still play the old games, you put it into your closet, or like me, I had a shelf of just consoles hooked up all over the place. I had all three Neo Geos, two Neo Geos, I should say. I had the CD. I even had the cart. And I had about 17 cartridges, if you can believe it. I got lucky. I went to a flea market, and the lady was like, listen, just get them out of here, $5 each. And I bought like 15 of them for $5 each. Those things was like $300. So that was a big score for me. And I had all the classics, all of them. The only one that I bought in full price, it was, oh my God, I can't believe I did this back in the days, $325 for The Last Blade. Ave Maria. I don't even know what I was thinking when I spent that money, but I did. And well, there you go. So I never really got rid of the consoles. I got rid of some games that weren't really being played. But we were conditioned to have this ideology. Now, of course, we're in 2025, Fuzzy Belvedere, and things have changed greatly. And like many things before it, Xbox, they make moves, they do things, and they get all the rocks and the arrows. That's just the way that they are. They've been dying for the last, 20-something years. They've been dying ever since they were created because, and listen, let's not make a mistake. Nintendo and PlayStation have earned their spaces, right? PlayStation is one of the most recognized brands in the top 10 in the world, and there's reasons for that, folks, whether you want to admit it or you don't. If you don't like their games, and I get it. I tell you, I love their games. I just hate Sony as a corporation because they do nickel and dime the people, and I'm one of those people, so I don't like that. Nintendo is always going to Nintendo, and you know what? Maybe because I'm a fan since I was 15 years old, when they take a game from yesteryear and they remaster it and they throw it on there for full boat and I buy it, I know I'm a part of the problem, but that's because I'm a Nintendo fan. I like all their stuff. Getting back to Xbox here, Fuzzy Belvedere, Forza Horizon 5 has done some pretty amazing things prior to its release on PlayStation 5. It has over 40 million players. I believe it's over 44 million players around the world, and that's on two platforms. That is on Xbox, and that is currently on PC. 44 million people have played this game. That is a stunning number when you consider that it's a quote-unquote racer, which according to Jeff Keighley and several people that voted, or let me rephrase that, didn't vote for it when it should have won Game of the Year, it's too niche. It's a niche thing. You folks remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget it. I'm like an elephant. Sorry. But I do want to bring up the tweet here. Now, I want to shout out quite a few people. I saw, Okami talking about it. I saw Post Up talk about it, as well as Hasdor Gaming. I saw Shinobi 602, Ecstasies. There were a lot of people talking about the what we're going to get into right now regarding where it is on the charts for PlayStation 5. But I pulled Okami 13 underscore because I do like his stuff, and he did make it very simplified in the order on how we're going to talk about this. So, Fuzzy, according to what is absolute facts, Forza Horizon 5 is topping the PS5 pre-order charts in multiple countries. And let me break it down for you folks to show you how big of a deal this is for Playground Games, for Forza Horizon 5, and more specifically, Xbox. It's number 1 on the PlayStation Store in the UK, number 1 in Canada, number 1 in France, number 1 in Germany, number 1 in Mexico and Italy, as well as Brazil, and it currently sits in the US at number 3, 4, and 13. I mean, folks, look, I knew that this was going to be a winner because it's Forza Horizon 5. Let's call a spade, folks. It might go down, and Fuzzy will back me up on this, as probably one of the greatest racers in any generation before it. I mean, there are some that are really good that you go back and you think about. Burnout series, especially Burnout 3, is phenomenal. And there's a couple of Need for Speeds in there. For me, it's Underground, the first one that launched on the 360, one of my favorite racers of all time. You had that racer, Motorstorm on the PS3. Again, another one of my favorite racers that I actually hope that they remaster in some way. I will pay for both of that. I'm sorry, folks. That's my favorite racer. But when you go to Forza Horizon 5, Fuzzy, and you consider that already 44 million have played it, and this kind of reception on PS5 says that they are starving on PlayStation for an arcade racer of this ilk. Let's talk about it, dude.
I think the funniest thing, and I just double checked it again on PlayStation Store, they don't make it easy to find this game. Like if you go on their website and type in Forza Horizon 5, it brings up Crew Motorfest. So you have to be looking directly for the link, or have searched on it as far as like from the web and then go and then link it that way. It's not as easy to find unless you're really digging deep. So it's almost like Sony didn't want this to have the momentum that it does, at least on the US side of things. But yeah, it is the best arcade racer of current day. And it's already had well over 44 million players in that game. I expect when it hits PlayStation, they'll probably add another 5 million players to that tally. But given how well this game is done on just PC and Xbox already, it's no surprise to me that it's doing well on PlayStation with the pre-orders. And can price, like if you buy it on Xbox and you have a Game Pass subscription, you're saving, I think it's like 20% or 25% or something like that. So they're paying the full 60 because this was one of those games that launched at 60. I think Starfield was Xbox's first party game to do the full $70 price at launch. But when this one launched, it was at 60. So they're paying that same launch price. And they have the option to get the Ultimate Edition, which I highly recommend just for the fact that you'll get a ton of cars right off the rip, as well as the expansions. So if you're into Hot Wheels or into rally racing and stuff like that, having that expansion in the $99 package deal definitely is worthwhile at that point. But it's no surprise. I think the funny thing is with the delay of Fable and how people were talking about, well, there's no way that could be gameplay and blah, blah, blah. And we've heard from some that have been that have worked on the game. It's like, yeah, that's definitely gameplay. That's actually, they've scaled it back a bit or turned a few of the visuals down a bit. And that's exactly what you can expect it to look like. And it's almost like that was a surprise to people. But then they must have forgot back in 2019, I think it was, when we saw that opening trailer where we thought we were watching live video feeds from Mexico with the cactus and the wind blowing and the dust, blowing off the road, and then the car zooms by. Yeah, that's how it looks in game, and you can expect that. And it may not be the traditional way of doing things, but I think in the grand scheme of things, this game going over to PlayStation is going to show what a arcade racer can do, is supposedly being a niche, category as far as the player base or player count in general. Like arcade racers or racers in general used to be a staple in, video games. It was always the showpiece for new hardware, and it was always like the chill, more relaxed, not as competitive as like the shooters, but there was some competitiveness, especially when you had like the Need for Speed, time trials and things like that. You'd always want to, outdo your friend on that leaderboard and stuff like that. And they're going to have the leaderboards in the realms as far as like the skill score, as well as all the accolades that already exist in the game, on top of the ones that they're adding once it lands on PlayStation as well. So this is going to be a fun ride for a lot of those that are just, getting, their first, taste of Forza, and with probably Forza Horizon 6 showing either later this year or sometime next year. Yeah, this will definitely, plant that seed for the audience for Forza Horizon 6. And I can't wait to see how crazy it gets, because I expect to see a lot of video people drifting and doing things that you can't normally do in like GT7, or things that they could only dream of in like Drive Club, which unfortunately went the way of the dodo. What was it, like 3 or 4 years ago? So yeah, this is going to be an awesome land on PlayStation. I encourage everybody to start, setting up tunes and paint schemes, so that way when their brethren over at the PlayStation camp finally get a hold of this game, they can, make money off of them using your artwork or using your tunes and things like that. So yeah, it'll be fun.
As much as I want to talk about what's going on with Avowed, because that's the second half of the show, I do want to ask a second question to the chat, and I want to ask a serious question to you. And this is directly at you specifically, Fuzzy, because you play Gran Turismo 7 and you quite enjoy it. There obviously you had a lot to say about its launch and how buggy it was, and the microtransactions that no one talked about that showed up that completely missed a review, which course should have been points off how egregious it was. Here's my question though. Okay, so look, Polyphony has been a developer for Sony for decades. Some of my favorite, and I'm going all the way back, folks. When Gran Turismo first came out, Gran Turismo 1 and 2 were phenomenal. I mean, they, of course, you play them now and you're like, oh my God, my eyes are going to bleed. But the truth of the matter is that for me, Gran Turismo 3, in my opinion, is pinnacle of the series. It is by far one of my favorite in the series, without a doubt, for a multitude of reasons. And now we come to Forza versus that. Okay? Now, the thing is this. Polyphony, they don't seem to have the same spark with Gran Turismo as they did in prior iterations. I mean, I'm not saying this to be console worry. I'm saying that is, I mean, Fuzzy will, get into more detail as to why that is, because he is the racer of the group, right? So we're gonna go based on what he said. Mm-hmm. But I think that Sony finds themselves in a very unique position, because, and I mean this, Gran Turismo 7 has sold over 14 million. According to the numbers that we pulled a couple weeks ago. That's impressive, because that is as niche as it comes. It is a sim racer to its core. So the fact that it's 14 million sold on PlayStation 5, that's freaking great, right? There's no denying that. It makes sense as to why, A, it hasn't been discounted in any way. B, it's not in their premium service, which in itself is egregious. Right, those are two points that I cannot sign off on, but that's Sony for you. Here's my thought and theory: once the PlayStation community, and I'm talking about the mains, I'm not talking about people like us who have already played this. Mm-hmm. Right, I'm not buying it on PlayStation 5. I own it. I don't need to buy it on PlayStation 5. Mm-hmm. Now, if it was in the service, that's a horse of a different color. I would give it the old college effort, because I have the service. I pay for it. Yeah. But it's not going to go there. It's fine. What happens to Gran Turismo as a series once PlayStation players who have never played a Forza Horizon game get a taste of this? Is there a path back? And more importantly, can Polyphony respond in Gran Turismo 8? I understand one's a sim and one is an arcade. Folks, I get all of that. But there is something to be said about how approachable the Horizon series is. And listen, make no mistake, we say it's an arcade racer. Yes, it is. But they have some serious tracks in there where you could really, just drive the track. I'm not talking about breaking signs and doing jumps for height and distance. I'm talking about just straight up race that are just really good tracks. What happens if this starts outdoing what Polyphony is doing? I want to get your thoughts on this, man.
Well, the biggest drawback with Polyphony, you talked about that spark. I would say it may not be as much about the spark. It's more about their attention to detail aspect that slows them down. Like and this is no slight at them, but they are some of the slowest development devs out there for a racing genre game, which I understand why they want to pay every iota of detail or attention to detail as far as the way the bolts are, the way the trim level is on the tail lights and so forth. I get all of that. A lot of that is artwork in motion. That's great. Just for an example's sake, they used to do updates at the beginning of the month. And there was a stretch where they didn't do any updates for like several months. No car updates, no track updates. And they haven't done a track update in quite a while. And they've only added, I want to say 4 tracks since the launch of the game. They're now down to 3 cars that they just released the tail end of February. So they're already about 20 days behind their schedule from sometime in October, where they kind of slipped behind schedule. They're more than 20 days behind the beginning of the month to the end of the month as far as how they do their releases, as far as updates. And they've only added 3 cars. And one of them isn't really a car. It's the Mercedes Unimog, which is, by the way, it's in Forza Horizon. Meant as a racing vehicle. It's meant as a off-road, cut through the woods kind of vehicle, which it works well in some of the games that you can play in Forza. Like there's like the flag tag type game, King of the Hill and so forth. So that's where that game or that truck comes in handy. But that was just something recently added. And we're talking about a game that, if I'm not mistaken, has been out there it's going on 3, if not 4 years now. And they're only sitting at about 500 and some odd cars, like 530 or so. That being said, Forza is already on its way to 1,000 cars in Horizon. They're adding a car pack with this launch in April on the PlayStation. For those that may have already bought the complete car pack deal on Xbox or PC, you'll automatically get that new Nissan Retro car pack at no additional charge. But when it comes to playground games, they pay attention to details. Now, it may not be in every aspect to the length of what Polyphony does, because who's looking at the bolts on the mesh screen grills on the back of a Ferrari F40 in comparison? I mean, you can spend that time and use things like scapes in GT7 that is only a photo mode, and it's turned up to the nth degree because it's not an in-game type of scenario when you're taking photos. But if you look at a lot of the artwork that comes out of Forza Horizon, as far as the photographers or even the painters that are out there, or the creators that create these different tracks and landscapes and things like that, there's so much depth to Forza Horizon. And yes, it is an arcade, but you can turn off all of the nannies as far as for that, for the aspect of driving the car. And it goes closer to Simcade at that point, because you don't have to have ABS active. You don't have to have traction control active. You don't have to have steering assist or racing lines or any of that stuff. And it turns it up a bit more closer to what you would expect out of Forza or even GT7 for that matter. So with the exception of the diehards that are into Sims, I would say Forza Horizon is going to take a lot of attention away from it. And there's just one little caveat I want to say about GT7 with the 12 to 14 million copies sold. Many of hardcore PlayStation fans that bought GT7 either bought it in physical copy and never took it out of the box, or have not played it beyond like the first 2 tracks on the music run. Because I look for their names on like the leaderboards, nowhere to be found. Like I can safely say I have just shy of 4,000 hours in the game right now.
Whoa.
And I'm not one for like the leaderboards. I mainly do it so I can do the race recreation. Like I've shown some of my replays and things before where it's like I'm racing an IMSA race or something like that. But for the most part, a lot of the people that buy GT7 on PlayStation, they play it for a little bit and then they never touch it again. Like if you look at their daily activity or their monthly or even annual activity for it, it's like, almost non-existent. But there's daily, rewards for playing the game. But when it comes to looking at something like Forza Horizon, not only do you get daily rewards, you get weekly rewards and monthly rewards, and it stacks basically unlocking cars or unlocking features, or as silly as it may sound for some, clothing items for your character. Like there is a character creator. Now, one thing I like about GT7 as far as character creator, I guess you could say, is that they do have paintable helmets and driver suits, so you can create your own racing helmet or racing suit. But outside of that, for a simcade game or arcade racer, Forza Horizon has it where you can, with the exception of beards, which other than Sanders' beard, I wish they would. That's the one thing I wish they would add are like beards for like the guys in the game. But aside from that, there's clothing, there's costumes. If you want to, drive around as a Dorito chip, you can.
I'm driving around as an astronaut right now as we speak, sir. So there you go.
So there's a whole bunch of fun to be had, and there's different just like Fortnite, there's different dance moves you can do at the end of winning a race or finishing on the podium and stuff like that. There's team racing, there's solo racing, online, single player. It looks at your friends list if you do it as single player and offline, where it will have some of the names from your friends list, and they'll definitely give you a harder time as far as racing, especially depending on how well they do on certain tracks or certain playlists and things like that. But I think it will take a good bit of attention away from GT7, aside from those that are hardcore sim racers. If you're just looking to drive some fast cars, which there's tons of them in Forza Horizon, which, like I said, it's nearly 1,000 cars if it's not cracking 1,000 at this point, and I'm only at about 840 cars at the moment. So, and the 840 are unique cars. I probably have 860, which I have like 20 duplicates and stuff. Which,
wow,
when it comes to April, I'll start giving away a lot of those duplicates, which you can do. You can actually share cars, you can share your tunes, share paint schemes, share
and Mr. BoomStick XL right here, sir.
So it's, I would say, I won't say that GT7's in trouble, but I don't expect GT8 until 2030, just because of how slow they move. Hopefully they'll have that Sophie AI thing updated by that point. But aside from that, I think this is going to be a game that charts, even though it's not a full live service game per se, but it will chart like one. And I think you'll see, the numbers show something like 55 million people playing this game at some point, with the PlayStation camp being added to the fold. But I would say hopefully Polyphony or Sony in general looks to make its own arcade racer. Competition is great when you have, different approaches on the same, genre of game. But I think this is going to take a lot of money off of the table for Sony. I mean, sure, they'll get that 30%, but 70 beats 30 all day, every day of the week, all times, no questions asked type of thing. So we'll see how Sony responds, or if Polyphony even bothers, because them trying to make an arcade racer at this point would only take away from their making their bread and butter as far as their sim racer. But we'll see how that happens or works out.